My dad was an excellent cook, cooked much better than my mom. He was a perfectionist. He sewed better. He anything he did it to perfection. He was also a wood carver. I'll show you a picture of one of his wood carvings. He taught me wood carvings at 8 or 10 years old. My dad, personality-wise, I'll have to say, he was the strict of the strict. He was a non-negotiable dad. He was a dad that didn't smile a lot, and he was a dad that believed that you should not tell your child but one time what you wanted him to do, and if he didn't do it immediately, some form of corporal punishment would follow that. So I remember as a very, very young man him saying to me, look, I have 8 children. If I have to tell everybody what to do 3 times, that's 24 times. It'll take me a whole day to get a glass of water. He said, please understand, when I tell you I want you to do something, when the last word comes out of my mouth, I want your foot or hand to be moving. And if it wasn't moving, he would assist you rather aggressively in moving. I did receive many, many spankings from him, but at age 16, he sit me down and said, I think you understand my rules. I think you understand what I've been trying to teach you for 16 years. You can go and come whenever you want to. I trust that you have good judgment. You know how to stay out of trouble, so I declare you a grown man. He did sit down and tell me, I don't remember the total details of his life, but he said at 13, because his dad was very ill, he went to work to help support his family. He never finished 8th grade. He said his first job was a water boy in a rock quarry, and his job was to take a wagon and 2 buckets on hot days and go from man to man with a dipper to give them water. And that's how he earned money to help support. He had 2 sisters and a mother. I'll show you pictures later. His mother was Vannie Bacon. Her maiden was Irving. She was a tall, straight-haired lady, very much like him, who didn't take no from an answer for kids and said, whatever I tell you to do as my dad, I want you to do it and do it immediately. She was a true disciplinarian, a beautiful woman. We all knew her affectionately as Granny because her name was Vannie, and we kind of transposed that to Granny. Granny lived 4 doors from Mama Ida, who was my mother's mother, and when I would visit them as a kid, they fought over who should stay at one house. I was the king of the block when I was around. Back to my dad. My dad was probably the strongest, most dedicated man to his family I ever seen. My dad worked very, very hard, bought every penny he had home. He was a very disciplined man. He sang in the church choir. He was a very well-dressed man, though he only had 2 or 3 suits. When you saw my dad, and I'll show you a picture of him, when you saw him dressed to go anywhere after work, he looked like the CEO of the company. He worked very hard in putting an hour into shining his shoes, pressing every crease, every wrinkle in his suit was out. He always wore a handkerchief in his pocket. My mother did not iron shirts to suit him. He always ironed his own white shirts. He
True perfectionist.
true perfectionist. He very much wanted me to be a perfectionist like him. As a youngster, I had a hard time tying my shoes, putting my cap on straight. Occasionally he would remind me with a tap on the head to turn my cap around, tie my shoes, shine my shoes, iron my pants. All those things he taught me at the young age of 8, 9 years old. I remember one time asking him to tie a necktie for me to go to church around 8 or 9 years old. He gave me lessons and said, you can't go to church until you know how to tie the tie. So after about an hour, I was able to tie the tie. He never tied a tie again for me. He also gave me hour-long instructions on shining shoes, get the creases, wrinkles out of my pants from the hanger, and how to look like an immaculate dressed person going to church, although you only had one suit and one pair of shoes. It had to be sparkling to leave the house.
So you believe he got those traits from his mother?
I think he got
Primary?
those traits from his mother. His mother was a very orderly, meticulous woman. Our house, everything was ordered, everything was ironed and starched. So I think that came directly from his mother. Very opinionated man and knew everything and knew how to do everything.
So what was your mother like? How did your mother come to deal with a man of that
My
high
mother,
standards?
my mother was a perfect blend for him. My mother had zero standards on everything, and quite frankly had an attitude that she didn't particularly give a damn when it really got nailed down to being perfect or imperfect. That was not a part of her agenda at all. And when she got on her nerve, she felt quite few, and to speak her mind to him and go on about her business. I think it was the most perfect match for a very meticulous perfectionist dad like mine to have a mama that basically said, I don't particularly care, was the perfect match, because my mother had an unconditional love for me and her children like I've never seen. She would literally lie and steal for us. And especially if she thought it was going to end up in a spanking from my dad, she just said, oh, Cuttie didn't do that. And she knew I did. But she was an extremely loving person. One of the most beautiful things she ever told me was when I was very young, she felt that my dad had spanked me too much. And she confronted him about it. And he said that he was the only person in the world that could take me from boyhood to manhood. And if she did not interfere with him taking me, rearing me the way he wanted to rear me, since I was the firstborn boy, that she would always be proud of me. And they agreed that as long as he didn't spank me too hard, she would never interfere with any instructions he gave me. Fast forward, I get a job at 14, and I'm making $10 to $15 a week. My dad sets me down and says, now it's time to learn the first major lesson on being a man. Men always pay rent and have to buy food, and it's usually about 25% of your income. He says, I understand you're making $10 a week part-time, and I was, 50 cents an hour, working 20 hours a week at Dick's Ben's clothing store, 4th Street in Louisville. He said, you will need to pay me $2.50 every week for room and board. If you do this consistently in life, you will never have a problem paying your mortgage or rent, and you will never have a problem paying having food on your table. If you learn this lesson right now, I will assure you. And he said, you're going to learn it because I require it. Every Saturday when you come in this house, give me $2.50. I, of course, didn't agree because he'd also told me I had to buy my school clothes out of that same money. I had to buy my lunch out of that. I had to have car fare to go to school, and anything that I needed had to come out of that $10 that I was earning because he was no longer giving me money. I was 14 years old. I went to my mom confidentially and said, I need to talk to you about Dad. He's taking $2.50 of my $10 every week. Do you think that's right? She said, oh, no. That's not right. I said, well, will you talk to him? She said, no. I said, but I thought you said he's wrong. She said, yeah, he is wrong, but I agree with your dad long ago. As long as he taught you and reared you the way he wanted to, I would not interfere, so I won't interfere. So that was the end of the discussion. I paid $2.50. He never raised it until I finished high school and went to college. My room and board was $2.50 a week. A month before I graduated from high school, he says, I know you're going to have a lot of expenses, yearbook and prom clothes and all that. I'm going to relax it. For the next 2 months, you won't have to pay room and board. Of course, then I was making more money. I hadn't told him, but that was the only time he relaxed it. And I tell my children and grandchildren, that lesson taught me to buy 5 different houses 2 condos, and never be late on my rent or my mortgage, and never be without food on my table. That one $2.50 room and board lesson was one of the greatest lessons my dad ever taught me. The second greatest lesson he taught me was always save. He didn't say save, put back 10% of your money and you'll never be broke. Those 2 lessons go with me today. He is my hero. The older I get, the more I respect him. He was frightened and demanding to grow up with, but he was the best thing that happened to me in my life. He also told my brothers and sisters, my mother included, or said it by the time I was 10 years old, that I had to be the role model and the example for 6 younger siblings. He told me in no uncertain terms that whatever I did, my little brothers and sisters were going to mimic me and do it, so don't do anything stupid. And he would frequently remind me when I did something playful as a kid, you know your brothers and sisters are watching you, they're going to copy you, you're going to have to be that example for them. My motivation to finish high school and go to college was strictly to fulfill my dad's wishes that I get an education and be an example for my brothers and sisters.